Brian, thanks very much for joining us on this episode of Consultant Corner. Since October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we couldn't ask for a better partner to help us explore this critical topic with. We talk about the importance of training employees about the potential threats and what they should be looking out for, but breaches still do happen. We see more training focused on preventative steps that firms should take, but mistakes still happen. Given your experience, we'd love to get your perspective on scenarios like ransomware, how it's delivered, and what happens if you take the bait.
Sure, yeah, Carlos. Thanks for the welcome. I always enjoy talking with you and you guys there. So happy to be on. It's ransomware and what firms need to be doing in today's environments, and an interesting topic. And as I'm sure a lot of people know on here, the SEC has moved into enforcement actions on cybersecurity. So now is really a great time to kind of stop and look at what's going on. Kind of first, one of the problems I see in the industry comes down to the training. A lot of times the training is not based in reality. And to give you an instance, everyone's doing phishing training where they'll send employees a phishing link and it may say, a prince in Africa needs to transfer $1 million and they see who clicks on it, which is, for the most part, the majority of people out there know these kind of phishing emails and are keen to them. I'm going to make up numbers here, but let's say 95% of the cases that I work where there has been a breach, it always comes down to employee error, whether they accidentally clicked the link or they were careless with the IT. And so I think the training really needs to come down to being more reality-based to prevent this type of thing. So, for instance, one of the phishing emails that we've seen that was successful is just, one coming in. It's and if you've seen any of our webinars, we show how easy it is to make a malicious PDF file. And unfortunately, our industry has gotten into a mindset where they think PDFs are safe by default, and that's just absolutely not the case. So sometimes the attacks are simple, where it's a malicious PDF that's being sent to a financial advisor, and it may say something like, hey, I've only got $5 million at Fidelity in my retirement account. Can you take a look at this statement and tell me, how would you handle my money? And a lot of the advisors out there, when they see 5 million in incoming assets, they're going to click on that link pretty quick. And, I call that the greed channel. So real world phishing a lot of times follows greed in trying to get people to click. And the other one is fear. We see a lot of fear-based phishing attacks. Talk about one of the attack vectors that we watch. Several years back, there was a breach for a website called Ashley Madison. And Ashley Madison was an online database where married adults could get together and arrange an affair. And of course, a website like that's going to be a target. It got hacked. And what happened is that a lot of people that signed up for that website used the work email address, right? Perhaps that's easier to keep from a spouse or whatever, they use their work email address. So it's super easy to go into that breach. Here we have about 7 terabytes of breach data that we use to build our intelligence. Ashley Madison being one of them. And it's very easy to go in there and do a search for domains that have words like financial or capital or hedge or investment in it, right? And now you have a short list of people to blackmail. And those are the type of attack vectors that we see, where people reach out and say, hey, Jim Smith, does your wife, Cheryl, know that you were on Ashley Madison? And they can pick up that kind of information because these employees share everything on Facebook and Instagram and all these things. So it's very easy to take a LinkedIn account and link it to all these other social media. So these are the real world phishing attacks that we see. And I think that, CCOs need to be having, and consultants need to be having honest conversations about them to say, hey, look, if it's suspicious, you need to have a game plan, whether it's assets coming in and them trying to get to click on a PDF or, greed or fear or that kind of thing. It needs to be a conversation with them to say, hey, this is really how the attack's going to happen. So that's, one of the things that I think in terms of training needs to be a focus. The other thing I wanted to focus on is ransomware. And this, to me, has become one of those topics that has become out of control. And in fact, when I think when you really read about the people who have recommendations on ransomware, you're going to find that they're selling ransomware protection, right? And they talk about how their protection is the best, even if they click a link, it's going to keep files from getting encrypted and that sort of thing. And that's the completely wrong conversation to be having, right? You can make the best body armor in the world and put it on someone and tell them to walk through downtown Fallujah in a firefight, and maybe they'll survive because of the body armor. But maybe the best solution is to step back and look at a map and say, okay, well, maybe we can travel around Fallujah this way and not even have to get into that kind of fight. And that's a weird analogy, I know, but it's to say that maybe you shouldn't always be in that fight, and maybe you shouldn't always be looking for protection. Maybe it's what we term left of boom, intelligence. And when we're working with these firms, we want to prevent the attack from ever happening. And one of the first things that happen in an attack is that the hacker is going to do surveillance of your entire system and figure out where your email servers are located, your web servers are located, where your office is located, and then they start to attack it. So how can we prevent them from doing that? So I think in diving even more into that, ransomware really shouldn't be a concern. Any SEC registered firm, if you have an employee click a link, it should be okay, we're going to burn down the IT and build it back up. Because if you start chasing ransomware, you're going to go into a huge IT headache. You can't pay the ransom anymore. That's the other topic. The Treasury Department has come out and said you can't pay the ransom anymore. Because you could be funding terrorists, or you could be funding terroristic activity. You don't know where that ransom that you're paying is going. So paying the ransom is absolutely off the table for any SEC registered firm. So you have two options. One is you can spend weeks doing forensics and diving in and cleaning out systems, or you can be prepared from the get-go and have backups ready to go and automated backups of your system, and keep your files encrypted and use two-factor authentication. So that when you do have a ransomware attack and you have an employee click on a link and on a long enough timeline and a big enough organization, it's going to happen. It's an absolute, positive thing. It's going to happen. You should be ready for that, right? And it's just, okay, someone clicked the link. We're going to go to our business continuity plan. We're going to go to our backup systems. Okay, this network might have been compromised. We're going to get the traders off that network and move them to a hotspot. Whatever that unique business continuity plan looks like for that firm. When you hit ransomware, that's the time to reenact it, because burning it down and building it back up much faster and much cheaper than one, paying ransomware, or two, hiring an outside IT firm or forensics to come in.
Do you see more firms incorporating their ransomware testing or reaction as part of their business continuity plans or disaster recovery?
I think so. Part of the problem is, for one, it's hard to stage those kind of attacks or those kind of audits. For one, when we're pulling ransomware samples, it's hard to, for one, verify that the sample is actually what we think it is going to do, and it actually has the code, and we're not going to mess up any other network. So doing real world phishing testing and backing up and that sort of thing is kind of difficult to do. For the firms that have gone to these completely virtualized environments, it's easy to kind of set up a sandbox there and do some testing. A lot of firms are quite there to that. But again, that's adding a lot of headache, in terms of, should you be doing a ransomware specific test, or maybe should you just say, hey, what happens if we lost a laptop? How are we going to wipe that data and that sort of thing, and just walking through kind of the basis there. And in this, this is even outside of the SEC and FINRA and everyone has been vocal about having backups and redundant backups and capturing email. And these are all things we're supposed to be doing anyway. And so, having that business continuity plan in place and knowing that it'll work, I think is important for firms.
Not to put you on the spot, but what are the three biggest trends that you see for 2022?
I think the SEC enforcement actions increase. Since about 2014, we've had language coming out of OC releases and several other instances where they would be vocal about it. And I think we've turned that corner now to where, for one, if we start having more business email compromise, like we saw in the last enforcement actions, if we have breaks from policies and procedures where policies and procedures are saying one thing and the firm's doing something different, I think they're really going to start bringing heavy enforcement action on that. It's kind of like the warning period's over and it's coming. So I think that's going to be a part of it. Having solid compliance documentation and training in place, like whatever that means for your firm, walking through your threats and risk, saying, okay, we know we have employees working from home, which maybe 50-50. My clients, some of them are going back to working in the office. Most of them have said, hey, working from home is fantastic and we're more productive, and they're moving to that type of environment. So, I think 2022 is going to bring, and diving back a little bit, like this is another major problem we've had with COVID, and some of what we're seeing coming out of the SEC so far is that, with these people working from home, we don't quite know how to treat their home networks, right? Should we be doing vulnerability scans internally in these home networks? Because people have teenagers that are running gaming servers at home, and they have Alexa devices and Ring doorbells and Roomba robots. And every time we do a firm and I find a Roomba robot, like it's hard not to turn it on and send it running, right? Like these are all very vulnerable devices. And if we start scanning employees' homes, those kind of things pop up, and it's kind of how far do you go? And our employees going to be like, yeah, okay, I'll unplug the Alexa. Probably not, and that's a lot to ask. So, I think 2022 is going to bring that in terms of figuring out, how do we address that and that sort of thing. And then I also think too, we're going to see firms move to a more secure environment, making sure that they know the vendors they're using, solid vendors to pull their compliance together or pull their trades together. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of that, moving to zero trust environments, being, really, really big on two-factor authentication. I always tell people we don't sell cybersecurity services or ongoing IT services or anything like that. Because there, in our opinion, there's really not a whole lot to sell there. If you're using Office 365, put two-factor authentication in place. It's built in, it's free, and it solves 99.9% of all hacking problems. So I think in the coming years, not even 2022, a lot of these firms are going to really drill in on what it means to be cyber secure, and maybe it doesn't mean spending a lot of money on these end-to-end endpoint management type things. So those are some of the trends I see coming. I think a lot of it's just going to depend on how the SEC continues their examinations and their audits.
It's great getting your thoughts on what you're seeing. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and your firm, MTradecraft?
I've been doing MTradecraft for about 10 years. The first 10 years of my career was working in IT operations and working on the trade desk of small $180 million SECs all the way up to very large institutional firms like Bridgewater Associates. So had a pretty full understanding of IT and operations. And then with MTradecraft, we work with clients to secure their networks and build compliance documentation around that, and making sure that they are able to respond to an audit. And to doing that, what we call that left of boom threat intelligence, where we say, hey, look, let's go out and see what you're exposing to the world and how we can secure that before an attack even happens.
Brian, once again, thank you. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and our clients and giving us these tips. We'll obviously be thinking a lot about it. And now, since October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate it.